Welcome, one and all,
Hello.
to another Humpday Q&A.
Q&A.
So, I guess we're going to dive straight in. Hopefully you guys saw the thumbnail. We've got Viktor here with us. Let's just get into the do's and don'ts, and we'll get to the questions. Scott.
Alrighty. Be nice, be respectful, be a common sense adult. Don't post anything that is adult in the bad way. Rude or offensive statements otherwise against, common sense. Don't advertise or promote anything. We all know you need a job, and if you want us to use your service, well, this isn't the place to tell us. Don't spam the same question over and over and over again. Every single time you ask it, it goes to the bottom of the pile. If you're next, you won't be next for long. Harassment of any kind is not tolerated. No incels, no bigotry, no misogyny, no stupidity. You will not only be blocked from this place, we will pass your name around to everybody we know, and you'll be blocked there too. Lastly, have a good time. This is supposed to be fun.
Indeed, have a good time. And I think you'll find stupidity is optional. We can't control that.
What was that old line? You can't fix stupid.
I know, right? Yeah. So let's do something. Let's do our introductions. My name's Simon Lightfoot, Flutter Community Leader, CTO at Dave Angels London, and you can follow me on Twitter at Dave Angels London or X, whatever you call it. I'm also helping to run Flutter London and other community things. FlutterCon coming up soon. Blah blah blah. Scott, your turn. Go for it.
My name is Scott Stahl. I am also a Flutter community leader and an organizer of GDG Cleveland. You can find me on Twitter at Scott Stahl 2017. And hopefully also I will be at FlutterCon USA. Unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to make FlutterCon Berlin. It conflicted with a family vacation that I cannot move. So next, Randall unfortunately is not with us today, but Danielle is more than capable of filling the shoes.
Exactly, except I can't be the question magician because I'm not logged in right now. So, but oh well. So I can't quite fill that shoe. Help. But I can make the joke that, hey, everybody, if you've got a question, put the queue in front of it so that Scott will know to put it in the queue. All right, that was for you, Randall. Hi, everybody. I'm Danielle Cox. I am one of the organizers of the Flutteristas. I'm also a Flutter tech lead. I'm the Flutter tech lead at a startup called Ardley here in the U.S. And so I'm blessed. I do get to work on Flutter all day, every day. So that's really nice. And yeah, I'm pretty sure we're calling it Twitter.
Yeah.
And it was on there before. I'm a figure skater, but it'll be whenever my name shows. You'll see it there on Twitter. So.
Yep.
And we've got.
By the way, speaking of stuff that shows up in chat. Yes, Raph, and you're my baby brother.
The community is amazing. I really do. All of my good friends right now, with the exception of two that I've been carrying around forever, all of my best friends now are all in the Flutter community.
Yep.
It is amazing. And yes, I cannot say that enough. And
the only sad thing for me, and I wish I was kidding, but all of my friends in Flutter community and basically all my friends except for 2 or 3 are in Europe.
Yeah, well,
you know where you need to move then.
Flutter's strongest,
Yeah, now you know where you need to move to Europe.
I know. We're in the dinosaur age over here in the US. People are still doing native.
I mean, one of the coolest things, I showed up a couple days early.
Before we start the conversation, let's finish introducing you, right, Viktor?
Yeah. Hi, Viktor.
Hey,
we did forget about you, honest. Welcome.
Speaking of our European friends,
right? So
please introduce yourself, Viktor, just for those people that don't know who you are.
Right. So I'm Viktor. I'm the founder of Serverpod. I used to work on the Flutter team a couple of years back. I'm also the organizer of the Flutter Stockholm meetup and the Full Stack Flutter online conference that we had a couple of weeks ago.
And I really have to apologize to you for not being able to submit. I've been chock-a-block. So
no worries.
Next time. next time.
Yeah, next time. Yeah, we had plenty of speakers on there. So, but it would have been fun to have you too, obviously.
Of talks. So, what were we talking about before?
About friends of Flutter. That's not an important topic, but
we were talking about my baby brother, Raph.
Wait, I was just trying to think. It wasn't FlutterCon when we last met, Viktor, was it? Last year.
Yeah.
Has it been a year? Has it been almost a year already?
Yeah. I'm coming this year too, though. We have a booth this time.
Great.
Awesome.
Should be fun.
You're coming to New York too for FlutterCon USA? Sure you are.
I'm coming. So we're actually coming 3 from the Serverpod team to FlutterCon in Germany, and then it will be just me for New York because we're onboarding 3 more people.
Well,
so it'll be tough if we all take off.
Now we had this question just before the show. That is a real background behind you, not a fake background. You actually have an office with Serverpod written on the wall.
We do.
Awesome.
And
it's sort of the budget office, actually. So you walk down through a high school, and it looks like you're walking down into the basement. But the office itself is actually pretty nice.
We were really impressed up till then. I'm just saying.
Shouldn't have said anything.
For those that don't know, what is Serverpod?
So Serverpod is basically a backend framework for Flutter written in Dart. So it gives you the benefits of you can use Dart for your full stack from the front end to the back end. And that has some huge benefits, like you can share code between the front end and the back end. It's also much easier to find developers because they only need to know Dart, basically. And we covered pretty much everything that you need from a modern server framework. So we have support for authentication, streaming data. We have great logging. We built a very complete ORM, which was actually a huge undertaking, and everything is type safe. Support for null safety. We have support for database migrations, relations, everything.
Does the RM back onto different data stores, or you just
right now it's just Postgres, and the reason we picked that is it has like the strongest support for scaling stuff up, because there's some really, like on Google Cloud you can get services that scale to like any size.
AlloyDB.
AlloyDB, and you have also one called Spanner. So this will scale like from like a hobby project to something that's really, really big, and I don't think like any other solution really does that. So that's why we picked Postgres, but who knows, in the future we can add support for more databases.
I saw an article yesterday which was around PG Vector, which is the vector database extensions for Postgres. Actually outperforms Pinecone, the other official vector-based database that's been used for AI as well. So that's kind of interesting as well. So Postgres seems to be a very strong option.
They also have like a document database if you want something similar to MongoDB. That's just built in and works great.
JSON B columns, right? On
maybe,
Postgres.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
It's pretty cool. So I didn't get to see Craig's stream last week on the Flutter channel, official Flutter channel, where he was working with Serverpod. I know he's been doing a few different things here and there. But is it super simple? I literally haven't had a go at Serverpod yet. I literally said this to you last year, I think it was. Okay, I'll have a go with it, let you know. It's been a year. It hasn't happened. But
it is to get started, it's very, very simple. We built a great tooling around Serverpod, so you just do Serverpod create, and you can create a project. Sets everything up for you with the bindings. And the way it works is that you add methods. So you create an endpoint class on the back end. You just add methods, and we have a command that will analyze your server and replicate those same methods in a client. So when you call those methods from your Flutter app, it's just like calling a local method. And we take care of like the whole generation of a protocol, and behind the scenes it's just a REST API, but we generate like everything in there. So that makes it, I mean, very accessible, and it's very easy to move. Something we hear from our users is that they move things that really should belong on the server to the server, that they otherwise, it's just faster to write it on the client maybe, because you're like using Dart code and it's a hassle getting stuff done on the back end, but here you can just like copy paste the method and it will work on the server as well. So that's pretty cool.
There's it was quite difficult at the very beginning when doing Dart on the server side, because there's so much Dart code is also dependent on Flutter. But now there's a lot of Dart actually have that distinction between Dart and Flutter. So you haven't got that problem of the Dart UI package being a dependency and trying to deal with stuff on the server side requiring that. Does your code does it compile down like with AOT? So like if someone runs it, does it have to have a runtime, or does it?
Yeah. So typically you will compile it ahead of time, and I think the preferred option is probably to build it into a Docker container and run that somewhere, and then you have like the pre-compiled code. If you want, to maximize compatibility, you also have the option to do the kernel code, which is sort of an intermediate layer for the compilation in Dart. So a little bit like how Java is compiled, and then you have sort of a just-in-time that optimizes the last bits and parts when you run it.
Yeah.
So that's pretty cool too. That being said, we're actually building a hosting service for Serverpod that we hope to have out this fall, that we call Serverpod Cloud. So that then it will be like very, very easy to deploy your server, just like a Serverpod deploy command.
And that'll be based off of the like Docker containers. So does that mean people can like run other code in there as well as Serverpod?
So I think
not sure yet.
Initially, you will be able to run your Serverpod code, and then maybe you have your other code as services. Or, we haven't quite decided exactly what this will look like, but I mean, it would be nice if you can connect to native code in some shape or form.
Cool. Any questions from you, Danielle? Scott?
I've got a point that Danielle raised in chat. That is, if you have a link and you put it in your comment, not only will we not see the link, we won't even see your message. So but if you're like, well, how come you're not talking about my question? How come you're not talking? And we say we don't see it. If you put a link in it, that's why. Now you will see it. But
the more important part, though, is the first part of that, which is if you have a code sample, you can create a GitHub gist, share that ID with us, and we're happy to, take a look at that, which is what I believe.
Just the ID number. Don't share the link.
Yeah, if you do a link, it won't work, but the ID number. So anyway, so that I'm glad to see that starting to happen a little bit. But I think Simon was really meant if I had any questions for Viktor, and I guess sure. I mean, I've done like Laravel coding and stuff like that. I've hosted my own websites and stuff like that, on a server somewhere. How would you recommend getting started? But I haven't done it. Haven't done it in years, not since I've been doing Flutter. So how would you recommend kind of getting started with that and starting to create my own kind of back end with things now?
So we have obviously a couple of getting started tutorials that I think is a great place to start. I made a half-hour sort of introduction to how backends work that is walks you through all the basics. So we have that on our YouTube channel. We also have pretty extensive documentation for Serverpod.
That's awesome. If you've do we have his YouTube channel? Throw a link up, Simon?
I was just trying to find it. If you have it linked, so you can pop it in the chat.
I don't know it now, but Viktor, you could put it in the private chat there on the thing.
Go to YouTube, click on the search.
Yeah, that's what I need to do too. Yeah.
Enter.
Yay!
Found it.
Found it.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, it's in
YouTube at Serverpod.
Yeah.
Sounds
I figured it'd be
about
something
right.
like that, but, you know.
Yeah.
Nice.
Hey, it was better than let me Google that for you.
Yeah, that is.
I just assumed I just assumed Simon would have been faster than me at getting it. So there you go.
I was actually just exploring the Serverpod documentation. I kind of find it interesting. You kind of got like a widget route.
Yeah. So we have something in Serverpod that we call Relic, and that's an actual web server too. It's still a little bit experimental, so we are going to do more work on it. But it's actually pretty cool that you can. For many apps you build, you will need to have both an app server that will serve your app with information, but you will also need a website. For instance, I worked on a news app before. I started Serverpod, and we needed both, the app to be really nice, but when you share a news article, you need to be able to send someone a very quick web page with like the news story. You can't expect them to download the app and, go through that whole process to use the link that you share with someone. So that's something you can do with Relic, and you're still sort of in the same ecosystem of Dart, and you can access the database, and you can share like the business logic with your application server, which is pretty cool.
I was thinking about it's very similar to what Jasper's been doing with server-side rendering.
Yeah. So actually, Jasper has a plugin for Serverpod as well.
Nice.
So you can use them together. So with Relic, you can use Jasper.
It sounds like it's pretty performant as well.
Yeah.
According to my little brother.
Your I've got a question for you actually. I was just looking at it. So you said it supports streaming. This is like what sort of streaming are you talking about here? This is just the streaming data in and out. So for example, someone uploading large amounts of data in a body, or actually real-time streaming as in like WebSockets.
All right. So
or both.
I was talking about WebSockets here. But that being said, we have support for both. So when it comes to WebSockets, you can send messages or serialized objects back and forth through streams.
Nice.
So if you're building a chat application, you will need to have real-time communication, for instance, or if you're building a game. So that's something we support. But you can also upload files. So we got libraries for uploading files to both Google Cloud Storage and S3.
So, okay. So I mean, is that like streaming requests and responses? So what I mean by that is like, so there's certain workloads that are not like reading the entire request, process, and return a response. It's streaming a request and streaming a response, right?
Right.
So it handles both then.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So to make sure that's clear.
Yeah.
Cool. And this is how many have you been working on this now? There's not a small amount of work here. It's not, obviously you said it's not just you, but was it predominantly you working and building this at the beginning?
Yeah, so I started this out as it was like my own little project, and I financed it by building an app for another startup here in Stockholm. And I built their app on Serverpod, so I got the chance to eat my own dog food. And then I raised the first round, like a sort of friends and family round, 400,000 euro, and I brought on board 2 co-founders that are both like really, really great. One used to be team lead at Minecraft. The other guy was CTO for a big startup that used Flutter and Dart. And end of last year, we raised our first pre-seed of 1.7 million euro.
Wow,
so now we're sort of expanding the team. We're 4 right now, and this fall will be 7 working full time. All engineers. I'm the one doing the non-engineering.
Yeah, engineers are much better than venture capitalists.
right?
I was going to say, and that's how you can afford to be located underneath a high school.
So,
Yes.
yeah,
In the basement.
So actually, quite a few of our investors are engineers too. So there can be an overlap.
I mean, to be honest, though, it's an engineer's product, right? Like at the end of the day, this is something that facilitates more engineering, right? So
definitely, and even if you like hire someone for sales, if you're selling to developers and you don't know how to program yourself, that would be very, very hard, I think.
Yeah.
And that brings me to a quick little point, something that I find aggravating. Developer relations is all about teaching developers how to use things, giving talks, getting out there, meeting developers face to face at conferences, asking what works well, what doesn't, taking all this information back to the company so that the product can be improved. And that includes finding out things that are not working, that are pain points. All too often, what you see is these companies advertising for developer relations, and they don't want developer relations. They want marketing.
Yeah.
And they want you to sell to developers. And it's like, that's a completely different job. So yeah, I mean, it's developer marketing would be perfect for what you're doing.
Yeah. I guess I'm sort of doing all of that now.
The man of many hats.
Yeah.
Yes.
But we're actually going 3 of us to FlutterCon this summer, so that will be fun.
That'd be awesome.
And,
so what's next?
Next, so the big thing that we're working on right now is Serverpod Cloud, but we're also adding a bunch of other features in parallel to the framework itself.
What's your favorite feature you're adding?
Oh, that's a good question. So we're going to do sort of a retake on the authentication parts. That doesn't sound too exciting, I guess, in a sense, but it will help people
authentication.
a lot.
Authentication is way more complicated than people think.
It is, and it's super important though if you're gonna.
And you have to get it right as well. You can't get it wrong because then that opens you up to compromise. So
definitely. Yeah. So
off by one sends you to somebody else's account.
Definitely don't want that.
Yeah. But apart from that, what we did we just released Serverpod 2.0 a few weeks ago, and it didn't have like too many new features from the version before, but we sort of laid the groundwork so that we made all the breaking changes we need to add like a whole bunch of new stuff over the coming year. So we went through all those things that we need know that we need to break, like for creating better authentication. All the groundwork is done. So it's more like adding adapters and repackaging it a little bit nicer. And also we're improving this, working with streams a little bit. That's almost done. Adding stuff. There's like loads of small little changes that will just up the developer experience.
How about I'm just kind of curious, and I've built four Dart backends for applications.
All right.
All slightly different, all covering all these topics, right?
Yeah.
How's this in sorry, let me get my words out. I completely forgot my question now.
Did you write it from scratch or?
Oh yeah. Well, like,
type it into the chat, but don't forget a Q.
Each one's an iteration on the last, but no, I was just thinking about how you handling concurrency. Like, have you also done benchmarking on this, right? So, are you doing multiple isolates? You just start spinning up multiple instances. What is your sort of domain there? Like,
our plan is to have multiple instances and scale horizontally there. I think at least for the short term.
So move the scaling outside of the app logic and into the cloud domain. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So you scale up multiple Docker containers, for example, to handle the load.
Yeah. Exactly. But we also built sort of inter-server communication and caching that you can share between the instances. So that's all built into Serverpod. So that makes that scaling
nice.
Very easy. Yeah.
Cool.
Because you
Sounds
need
interesting.
to solve that somehow. In a way you look at it, you probably, if you're building a big app, it won't be able to run on a single server. So you need to be able to.
Oh yeah,
split them
no,
up.
but this is it. There's certain tasks that you want to handle with requests coming in. There's also certain tasks that may be more like cron jobs or something else, which is something that you're running in the back end, maybe from a say from something waking up a node on the back end to do some processing work, right? So
Oh yeah.
These are, I wonder how this kind of falls into this pattern. So if this is always driven from HTTP from the front end, or if there's chance to have other parts of your back end that are separate from your main sort of API, should we say?
Yeah, so we actually built a lot of this stuff into our servers, into Serverpod. So we added a feature that we call future calls, which allows you to call a method sometime in the future. And that can be like, say you have a user that signs up and you want to remind them of your service 1 week from now, you can just make a future call and send that email in that call. So that will work across instances, and it will, be serialized into the database and pull up at the right time and stuff like that.
Okay. Interesting.
So that's a pretty neat feature, actually. That otherwise you have to set all that up yourself with some cron jobs and figure stuff out. It's quite a bit of work, and it's nice to have it just built into the framework.
Oh, for sure.
And
I was trying to think of a cron wordplay joke, but I couldn't. So
I'm sorry. You just failed at filling in Randall's shoes.
I know, because there should have been. There's got to be one. I just can't think of what it is. Maybe chat can help me out.
Yeah.
Shall we?
Quick question. I'm playing around a bit with AI, and as we discussed before, retrieval augmented generation does require a separate server for the vector embeddings.
Yeah.
Would Serverpod be something I would want to use for that, or no?
I think you definitely can use that. I actually built something similar to that.
Can I steal it?
Just as a hobby project. So we had this company reach out to us, and they're selling. They actually added this to our documentation. You have like an Ask AI button where you can ask questions, and they wanted like a lot of money for that. And I figured, how hard can that be to build? So I took like a weekend and I put it together, and it wasn't too hard. And then I guess my coworker that was talking with those guys were like, yeah, our CTO just put that together over the weekend. And then they gave it to us for free, so we're not paying for it.
There you go. Yeah, I'm working on a couple things that hopefully may turn out to be something, but I have to see what's going on. And
yeah,
RAG definitely seems like the solution, because right now I'm sending up a context that's over 10,000 tokens.
Yeah,
that can get a little expensive.
Yeah, it was pretty easy to set up that whole thing in my experience.
Nice.
And I'm sure they're like Dart APIs for.
Yeah, they have LangChain Dart.
Yeah,
for one thing I'm looking into.
But I was thinking Gemini must have APIs for that too, that you can just plug into, or I'm sure OpenAPI.
I think they just recently came out with an embeddings model, a couple of them actually.
Okay.
Because all the tutorials I can find for doing vector embeddings, they're all using everybody else's models and none of Google's. Well, no, I'm sorry. You could use Vertex AI in some of them.
Okay.
So anyhow, questions for Viktor, keep asking them. And apparently we need to start them at some point, because we're halfway into a normal show.
Yeah,
as if we ever do a normal show.
We'll jump into the question just a second. So oh, damn it. I literally had a question in my head then, it's disappeared.
I told you, put it in chat.
Oh my goodness, I was just looking for documentation. That was it. That obviously you can just create a so your system of building functionality is around more of an RPC RESTful sort of interface, right?
Yeah.
Obviously, you can build non-RPC driven, like just like basic. I'm going to handle an entire request myself type handlers. Is that a thing? Like, I don't know. I'm just thinking about WebSockets. Not webhooks, for example. So you know, you've got some special piece of logic that requires you to have raw access to.
Yeah, so that's why we also added this Relic web server, where you can serve like regular HTML pages, so you can build those hooks that you need to communicate. For instance, I used it for Revenue Cat to keep track of subscriptions, so that can be a use case.
Nice.
So yeah, it's pretty easy to set that up and have sort of the best of both worlds.
Very cool.
Interesting.
All right.
Cool.
We have a few questions.
Yeah. Should we just start the questions?
Yes, you're going to have to wait. Mommy's coming. All right. Man, life with a rescue dog. All right. Is it possible to use Serverpod for offline desktop apps?
Yeah, so we actually released something called Serverpod Mini, which is a version of Serverpod without database bindings in it. So you can run it without Postgres if you just want to use another database or something. I'm not exactly sure what the use case would be here, but maybe you need a desktop app that's also a server where your sort of neighbors in the office can connect to or something like that. You can definitely use Serverpod for that.
I suppose there's an interesting point to this question, which might be, it says for offline desktop applications, right? So I guess that, if you're running like a lot of those kind of applications run a local web server, right? Something where
I was gonna say,
they're using like the idea of having maybe a website, like a local website that offers their UI for their app or who knows what, right?
I mean, you can definitely do it. I'm not exactly sure what the use case would be. Maybe it could be an interface towards.
I mean, if you're going to build a Flutter app,
you must need that.
Yeah. If you're writing a Flutter app for desktop, well, you might as well just build it for your app for desktop, right? Like, I don't think.
Well, I mean, it's possible if you've got an app that would normally talk to a back end and you want to be able to run it locally offline, you don't have to rewrite the back end code.
Sure.
So then you could come up with something that would serve it locally, and then.
But what I'm trying to say is you wouldn't need to have network connections at that point. You would just compile in your server code into your app, right? Like
maybe, but maybe you want to use the ORM if you have a database that you connect to.
Well, the other possibility I'm thinking is that maybe most of the time it uses an online DB, but every once in a while, if the user doesn't have connectivity, it would cripple the app if it didn't have some kind of capability to fall back.
I mean, that's a separate issue, right?
Yeah, so maybe it's more like syncing offline and stuff like that. Yeah, you have to handle that yourself currently, but I mean, that's something we have planned in the roadmap to build better support for. I think that would be a really cool feature to have, for sure.
Right.
Very cool. All right. Can we make large enterprise backends, or is it just for small and medium level projects?
Yeah, so I mean, this scales to any size, I would say. You could potentially build like Facebook on Serverpod. There's no limitations in what you can build, as long as you have the computing power behind it.
That's right. Throw more money at the problem. Throw more cloud resources. It's fine. Actually, saying that, did you see the bench? Did you see, was it the Shark benchmarks? Shark?
I did see that, yeah.
Yeah. They've actually got a Serverpod specific. Did someone from your team submit that, or was that something they came up with themselves? You know?
Yeah, they came up with that themselves.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
That's pretty cool.
Actually, see if I can find what I'm talking about here for those that don't know. Yeah, I'll pop the link in the chat here for anyone that doesn't know. It's a little benchmarking website for benchmarking web and compute for different languages. Let me see if I can present this while we're here.
Yeah, that's something we really want to set up ourselves too, is to have proper benchmarking for Serverpod.
So as you can see here, for those that don't know, there's a where is it? There, Dart IoT. Oh, sorry, a bit much.
Yeah,
Dart IoT Serverpod Relic. So it does 6,850 requests per second with a 4.1 millisecond latency at only 17 megs of RAM. And you base that off of memory. Yeah, okay, Rust, and even, I mean, obviously anything that doesn't do less, right? So like these aren't as structured as Serverpod, are going to eat up less memory and be faster. But you look at like requests per second versus memory, right? And it's actually really up there in all things considered, right? Look at that.
Yeah,
almost no memory.
That being said, I think typically in a server, I mean, people build stuff in Python, and that's super duper slow.
Yeah, as you
and
can
that
see
works
here.
fine. So it's usually not the limiting factor. It's
Yeah, exactly.
Like how fast that server is compared to like the time it takes to query your database is like 1% maybe or something. So
it's if you're only doing compute like and didn't require an external request per second at that rate would make a difference. But when you actually go, oh well, I spend most of my request time waiting for a database connection, then
which is the case like 99.9% of the time. So
I mean,
I think this is like a
PHP Symfony 72 requests per second, but then sorry, I look at some of these like frameworks. You're like, how did we ever write stuff with this? Like,
there's a related question. I believe it's related. Are there any plans to support offline first?
Yeah, so that is something. I mean, we are planning to do in the future. We're sort of laying the groundwork. We're working our way up from making sure the foundation is super solid to adding this sort of more fluffy stuff. I guess. I mean, would be a super useful feature, right? But you probably want to have authentication down really, really well, and making sure the streams are always perfect and all that stuff before you build that. I mean, that's just we're starting making the core like super good, and then I mean, it's already good, but we have some changes and improvements that we, based on feedback, want to fix. So that's a priority before we build these features that probably will be built on top of those features anyway. So
there you go, Raf. They're going to make sure that your favorite part, authentication, is solid before doing this, so that you will still be able to have fun with authentication, even after this has been implemented.
Right. I mean, that being said, we built Serverpod in modules, which is, I think, I haven't seen any other server do this. So when you add a module to Serverpod, because it has its like own namespace and will generate into your whole API. So we have a module that is a chat, and as the authentication is a module. That means that the module is not just server code, but it's also the client code and the Flutter code. So when you add authentication, you just like add authentication module, you do a few configurations, and then you drop into like a sign-in button in your Flutter app, and everything just hooks up. And same for the chat. You can just like drop that in, and it will just work.
Nice.
So that's something we hope we are going to, add in the future for many more things, like keeping things up to date offline. That could be a module, for instance.
I just found a PR that I need to submit to your repo.
Well, that kind of answers part of the next question.
That's right.
Is SQLite support planned? Or if not, would you welcome PRs from other people who are willing to do your work for you?
Right. Yeah, so we actually have quite a few contributors. I think something like this is a pretty substantial update. And we must make sure that we have like the resources to support it going forward. So I'm not sure exactly. I think SQLite support is something we may want to add more on the client side, probably.
If you're making more significant change, please get in touch with Serverpod's lead developer, Viktor, before getting started. Well, Viktor.
I'm most definitely happy to discuss it like in detail to see if we have what it takes. But I think that's something that'd be really cool for the sort of offline support, because you probably don't want to run Postgres on the front end.
You know, I've seen this a lot, and this is a great point here that you're making. I've seen a lot in like open source where someone says, "Well, I've done all of this work, you know, and they won't accept my PR or things like that." Yeah. And that's one of the reasons why they may not, is because if they don't have enough support in the future, then it's too much of a risk to add it now.
Yeah,
and I think that's something people need. You know, I've seen people talk about it with Flutter. I've seen people talk about it with other things. You know, so that's an important point to kind of make. Is if you actually add something to the framework, that's a commitment later on.
Yeah, that is a very good point. And also it takes us a long time to review this pull requests. We keep the
who maintains
quality of the code is like really high in the Serverpod project. So when people submit things, often they have done something that it's missing tests. It has like maybe works for one use case, but you have like 10 other use cases that you kind of need to support, or edge cases may not work. So you have all that stuff. And then the question is like, should we take the time to review this and try to get it working, or what are like the priorities? And sometimes it's things that sort of take us away from sort of our core mission of where we want to go with the product. So yeah, it's definitely a fine balance, but we definitely try to review all the pull requests that we get and give good feedback. And if there's something we can't like bring in, we will definitely tell you why. But definitely, if you build something bigger, definitely talk with us first, so that we like everyone is on the same page and we
well, if it's something I need. If it's something I need and I make it a module, then that should probably work for myself, even if we don't merge it in, right?
Right.
Yeah,
definitely. Yeah. For most features, that you can definitely do that, but there can be like core things too, like switching out the database may be a little bit of a bigger task than a module, for instance.
Sometimes it can be just what might work better in those situations is something where you've got a PR that opens up maybe the API surface a little bit, where you got hooks or makes it extensible. So then you can build something external to do the thing that you want it to do without actually compromising the core, basically.
Yeah. I mean, that's definitely the way we want to do with, if we do like add it now, it's pretty tightly tied with Postgres. So that's something we probably want to change in the future. So you can add in another adapter that can be any type of database.
Sure.
So it's more like that adapter work would need to happen first, and then we can. So it's not like we don't want to hack anything together. We want to build it right.
That's kind of the Flutter way there, to do it right. Yeah, that's absolutely right.
Yeah. And you know what? Considering the future and the way things are going, you might want to make it really easy to use Serverpod with LangChain Dart.
Yeah. I think it's probably pretty easy right now, as long as you can. I mean, you can import any Dart package, and if you want to have another database, no one is stopping you. You can just pull that in. It's just not like integrated in the system well as.
I mean, you wouldn't be able to use the ORM, the built-in ORM, right?
Yeah, you won't be able to use that, but you can use another database, and then it would be like pretty much any other server framework works. Where you most other frameworks, they pick like pieces from different places. So we made it like everything fits together, which is really nice, because you can pull a row out from the database, pass it onto the client, and it just like works with the serialization and everything. Whereas in most frameworks, those are kind of different languages, or you pull something out to a database and you may need to transform it before you serialize it and send it over and stuff like that.
So when I just off topic for just a second, watching the chat here, I was going to say, whenever I get a chance to watch Craig's show live, and I comment, he always says hi. So I want to take the opportunity to say hi, Craig.
Hey, Craig.
Craig's here. Where is he? He should be here. Hang on.
Yes,
what are you doing, Craig? We want to hear
Craig.
the first. We want to hear first user experiences of using Serverpod. That's what we want to hear.
I also want to know why you're not here if you're not doing improv. You're supposed to be doing one or the other, okay? All right, moving forward here. We have 8 in the queue at the moment. I don't know, Simon, do you have a deadline?
No.
No? Okay. So I was on the impression that maybe you had a meeting.
I've got another hour.
Okay.
Or two.
Can we expect improvement in Serverpod performance after the implementation of macros?
Good question.
Yeah, I think it won't affect like performance that much, probably because it's just generated code anyway that we already generate. But it can definitely help with the user experience of Serverpod. So we are very excited about like the macros in general.
Very cool. All right. Once again, Marco, we're right back to this offline. Will you be supporting offline syncing? We kind of touched on all that earlier.
Yeah. I mean, it definitely was where we're going in the future, but not there yet.
It's definitely one of those pain points, and it's not easy. We've done it on a few different projects now.
Yeah.
So I might have to have a chat with you, Viktor, about some of this. Give you impart some knowledge from our experiences.
Yeah. Exciting. Yeah.
Now I'm a little unclear on this next question. Give me some help here. Can I use Serverpod to build an API that's not dependent on generated client code?
Right.
Generated client code.
That's actually a pretty good question. So Serverpod you generate an API and you have an API surface that is like a REST API, but it will also generate a client that is Dart code that you use in your Flutter app. So you have like all the methods there, and then when you use that client, it will pack everything down correctly and call the right endpoints and the right methods and do like authentication stuff and all that for you. That being said, it's just a REST API, so you can use it anywhere. It's not super well, I mean, it's very clean. The API is very straightforward, but it's not super well documented yet. So we're trying to figure out if we want to do it like open API style documentation I think the thing is we added a bunch of features that are not exactly matching open API. For instance, and the stuff we want to add too as well. Like, for instance, we want to support inheritance between models, which would be really cool. And that you can't really do with open API.
It doesn't describe it, but you can present it, right, at the end of the day, right? So it's not a one-to-one, but the nice thing about having an OpenAI model, it does mean that you have got that flexibility of like importing that API service into other systems like Postman and things for debugging and deving.
Exactly. So
it's definitely a good surface to have. But equally, I think just outputting like a markdown kind of here's a list of APIs and their parameters and request and response is just enough to at least have your REST API documented.
That we definitely want to do. And I think we also want to build a JavaScript client, which would make it possible to use on the web and React Native, and that will cover, I think, 90% of all other use cases. Swift and Kotlin would be nice too, but I think JavaScript definitely would be a higher priority for us there.
Sorry, as soon as I hear Kotlin, all I can think of is all these people saying for Flutter, why not Kotlin?
Is a question. I mean, is this because? Well, I guess generating a direct JavaScript interface actually makes sense for things like React, right? I mean, I was just thinking about you could just take your Dart code and then compile it down, but then that comes with other problems when it comes to introducing that to a non-Dart code base, even compiled with JavaScript. So
we actually looked at that, and I think
it's like 56 kilobytes. It's 56 kilobytes. I think it was about 50 or 60 kilobytes base for just running a Dart code in JavaScript when I last.
Okay, I'm not too worried about that, but the thing is, like, when you do that, you need to describe how all the APIs look like in JavaScript, which would be almost as much code as I mean, a client
Well, this is what I'm
doesn't
trying to
have
say.
any logic in it.
It doesn't
pretty
feel
much
like it's
just
worth
the
it.
API
Yeah.
surface, so we might as well just do that, I guess.
I think there's the problem here is that when you start adding more features like offline first, and you start trying to expand that, and you have to support that, then it becomes maybe a more of a impactful thing, right? But then there's no reason why you couldn't, you couldn't like annotate your Dart code and have it generate, interface and things for you. It wouldn't be too difficult.
Yeah. We also have things like so in a method you can also throw serializable exceptions. So basically, in your server method, you throw an exception that will actually be serialized and unpacked on the client and thrown again. So it's like you can say you have like an authentication flow. This can be super useful. You want to like go through the steps, but you can bail at some points, and you can just throw different exceptions, and you can catch them on the client.
Nice.
So that's really nice, but a little bit hard to do a nice description of in OpenAPI, for instance, because you can have very many different response types.
I think it's more about,
and it's also hard to know exactly what those response types will be for a specific method.
I'd say the use case for OpenAPI is one of interoperability and not documentation. Like, so in terms of allowing you to operate the API from other places, not necessarily describe its inner workings, right? That should always be the realm of documentation where you can actually put down a lot more detail than you're going to get in any sort of open API spec.
Yeah.
I personally, my thoughts. Anyway,
so I mean, we definitely want to do some good documentation for it.
Yeah, that always helps us developers for sure. Before we get to the next question, Scott, I just thought we might want to make a point that right now we're getting these specific Serverpod questions going. So
yes,
so we got a few questions.
Yes, if anybody's
over.
Right now,
we see them.
We're trying to respect Viktor's time.
Right.
So we're doing the Serverpod questions first, and then anything not Serverpod related, we'll loop back to.
Yeah.
But
I don't get worried because every now and then we have missed a question before. And
oh yeah, no, we've got currently 3 more Serverpod questions. So just to let you all know, and if more come in, I'm going to have to bump them. So we'll let you know where we're at. Anyhow, speaking of running Serverpod client side for all of this, we've been talking about offline, but maybe online, maybe offline, but can it run client side on IoT devices?
What's this? That's not what that says.
Yeah, you got the wrong question.
Can I use Serverpod? Oh,
you got the wrong question up. There you go.
There we go. Whoops. I thought I had already knocked that one down. Okay. Could Serverpod be expanded to run on IoT devices?
Yeah, of course. I mean, both the client side and as long as you can run Dart, you can run.
Sorry, I'm actually just thinking more of the use case. So a lot of IoT devices need a headless interface.
Yeah.
So what you're actually doing is you're running the web server on your IoT device. Mm-hmm. I have a feeling maybe we do a bit of coding and try that today. So last night I actually got was it last night? Maybe the night before. I've got a RISC-V system on chip running Dart code. And we could try and get it to run Serverpod.
RISC-V.
So that might be fun.
That'd be cool.
That might be fun to try in a minute.
Yeah. Yep. I think a good starting point that can be Serverpod Mini. So you don't have to worry about the database and all that stuff. Wow.
Now, interesting question here. Interesting question. The both of these, this is a SciPede, Lychee, M1S dock, which is running a D1, and this is a Mango Pi, also running a D1, which I think just about everything RISC-V is D1. I'm not positive of that, but they are running Linux, so I would not call them headless.
No, they don't have a desktop.
Yeah.
No, mine do.
No, but that's the point. You don't want them to run a desktop. It's a waste of resources.
Yeah. That's why you run that. What I'm saying is these came out of the box with a Linux system. And I'm just double checking to make sure you're talking about running completely headless, no Linux whatsoever.
No, that's
You
not
still
how
on
it is.
Linux.
You still run Linux.
Well,
you still
okay,
run the
no
Linux code.
desktop.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah, but that's my point. That's the point. Even if they came out of the box, you could go like right now. I could go like apt-get install like X Windows or something, right? But there'd be no purpose in putting the entire rendering of a UI on the IoT device when you have a lovely, powerful machine accessing the IoT device. So you make it headless, so all the rendering happens client side with, like, say, a Flutter application, Flutter web application. And that could be your whole admin interface, but then your API running in Serverpod is running on your actual IoT device,
which is running a headless version of Linux.
Yeah.
Okay, that's what I was double checking. In other words, are we still running Linux under the hood to run this on?
You can get away with a really, really lightweight Linux system to run Dart. It doesn't require Dart itself doesn't actually require a lot. Like there's certain limitations on kernel and resolver and a few other things, but the Scratch Dart system that comes in a Docker container pretty much carries everything it requires. Yeah, it should be possible to really run. That you can have your init script for your Linux subsystem to actually like initialize straight into like Serverpod, for example, or some other Dart code.
You know, unlike most of the times I get a harebrained idea or a harebrained question, we're going to be able to find out the answer to this because Simon's going to be coding on this thing very soon, like today. So, speaking of Craig,
That's right.
Are there guides on how to write a minimum viable module? That would probably be very helpful.
MVM.
And
I think that's a leading question here.
New acronym, MVM.
Yeah, I think there is a page in the
Copyright
documentation with like maybe 3 lines on how to do this. So, I mean, that's definitely something we should explain better how that works and have a guide on how to do it. That's actually a great idea for a little tutorial.
Like how to actually get like a module off the ground and how to sort of integrate with different parts of the system. Yeah. So
there's a create command, so you can do serverpod create and say template module, and then it will create a module for you. And basically, the way it works, you just add endpoints as in the server. You add your database tables. All that is contained in the module, and then you can just add that into your main server. So it's pretty straightforward, but it would be nice to have a little tutorial for people to get started and explain why they should do it, probably. And it's basically reusable server code.
I was going to say, having never built a module before, so you build a module, obviously, as you said, it's modular code for your server. So then you would have your main server, you have some sort of way of saying, I want to use these modules, this is where the source code is. And then it will do some generate code to actually like almost like the plugin registrar, pull it all in and hook it all up, basically.
So basically the way it works, you just add it to your pub spec of your server, and then it will find out that this is a module, and then it will pull the database tables and roll them into your database migrations and everything.
Is that done at runtime or actually at compile time, like generate code or something?
When you generate the code, yeah.
Cool. What else do we have then? You're muted, Scott, if you're talking. Yes, indeed.
Alrighty.
You'd think by
I
now
keep forgetting about this mute. Anyhow, we've got 3 left, and they are not Serverpod questions. However, we shall see if that changes. Okay. This is an interesting thought here. Is there any way I can save a widget tree from an instance and send it to another app, then let the other app render that tree? Trying to create something like a screen share, but in an app. You might even be better off trying to share the screen. I mean, you could cast it.
It's an interesting point, right? It's interesting. There is actually this is just off the back of this, like the way that Flutter works is actually kind of interesting, because if you could actually integrate something with the Flutter trees, you can have the diffing happen on one side and the output, the render object happen on the other side. And if you can transition that across the wire, then you could actually have a remote desktop, right? And you've driven it directly from Flutter.
I wonder, if that was really practical, would Hixie have done that for RFW instead of using interpretive?
No. Let me explain. There's a difference between having this is the thing. Screen sharing is different from having a remote application. Let me be clear.
Okay.
Screen sharing is that you're sharing the visual output, and then the touch or inputs are being sent over the wire. The actions of those inputs and events are happening on the server side or the remote, and being received back again, right? The output. So there's a connection. There's a connection here. Whereas RFW is the remote Flutter widgets is about sending down the UI to be rendered with code and actually running it on the client side. There's a different,
which is a little bit more like what this question is. That's why I kind of tried to steer it back that way. I think I agree with you. I mean, I think the easiest solution to this is to actually do a screen share. If you want to do a screen share, you might just have to display it a little bit differently.
It's interesting because,
I was just going to say, we always say we don't work for Google.
Yeah.
But Craig just posted a really interesting comment.
Yeah, I was just NDA. We didn't see this.
So there's also a framework called Mirai that I think
framework called Mirai. Somebody named a framework after
Mirai.
Please
share it.
AI. So I don't have it here, but there was a talk at the Full Stack Flutter conference from a guy, Divyanshu, who talked about this. And I haven't seen the talk myself, but my coworkers were like super impressed. So maybe that can be something along those lines, I think.
Oh, I think it sounds something interesting.
So it's more like building a UI server side and pushing it to the client, but maybe you can sort of push it to multiple clients or share it somehow through that. Just an idea.
I mean, and to be clear, this is not how I would do a screen share app if I were doing one, but it's an interesting question otherwise.
So there was another talk by Damien at Full Stack Flutter conference where he made a Flutter app that was running on server side, and you could interact with that through a Flutter app that talked to the server. That was pretty cool too. So that's on the screen sharing track, I guess. Could be starting points.
I was just thinking, well, I was thinking about screen copy that we use, but that is actually able to take inputs as well. For those who aren't familiar, there's a little standalone app called Screen Copy. It's scrcpy.exe, and when you run that, it's kind of like it looks like an emulator, but it's actually just mimicking what is on your physical device and casting it to your desktop, with the exception you can actually interact with the portion that's on your desktop. You can click the buttons, you can do inputs, all that happy stuff. It's really, really useful, but again, it's not.
Didn't Apple announce that they invented something like that a couple days ago?
Yes,
probably.
Yes, just like Swift UI came out, about 6 months after Flutter? And 6 months, I think it was also 4 months or so after Jetpack Compose.
Victor said he'll be right back. It's interesting because when it comes to remote desktop stuff, the real problem here is, or screen sharing, on whatever device, is that you're using up so much bandwidth. You're basically sending a video stream, right? You can compress that. You can also do things like, if you integrate with the operating system, you can say only this portion of the screen has been updated, and you only send the visuals for that screen. So you're doing partial window updates. This is literally how your graphics card sends stuff over the wire as well. modern graphics card, should I say. And like there's a bunch of things you can do to optimize it, but at the end of the day is if you can actually get it all rendered on the remote side, just send instructions, that's how it works. And that's literally how GPUs work, right? So you instruct the GPU, draw a box with this color, or draw this pixel here at this size, paint a line here, you know, whatever it might be. They're your drawing instructions, right? That's your display list is a term that's used for this, right? That's then sent over to the GPU. The GPU renders it on the GPU side and then displays it on the screen, right? And that enables you to relieve the stress off of the CPU side of that transaction. You do the same thing, right? So you can put the instructions that would normally be used to render, you send that over the wire instead, and on the remote side, render it. And that's the optimal solution. If you've got something that you can represent the same, like you've got a way of rendering that this is the thing. If it's just an app that's built in Flutter, yes, you can do that, right? Because you're in control of that. The difference is when it becomes a desktop, right, or something like this, that it's all out of your control. So you're just limited to screen sharing, right? Like you had to send a picture of what you're doing, right? You don't get the rendering commands, but it is kind of interesting.
I was gonna say, yeah, Craig was calling you out there, Scott. Flutter wasn't
actually no, we didn't completely copy React because we produce AOT.
Not
inspiration.
The point's the fact that
Shh. Don't ruin my point with the truth.
But I do find it. I don't know what was done at the. I was literally just looking at the Full Stack Flutter conference, and when Victor's back, I'll ask him. But the videos, I don't know where the videos are if they've been uploaded yet. Oh, hang on a minute. Welcome back, Victor. I was about to ask. The Full Stack Flutter conference website doesn't list the videos. Are the videos uploaded somewhere?
So right now you need to sign up there, and then you can get to the live streams. But we're going to release all the videos on YouTube too. So we're working on getting that out. So that was
and the Damien Bast, server-side Flutter rendering widgets on the server. 1040 on track A for anyone that wants to look at that. Yeah. So as I was just saying, when you stepped away, like the obvious answer to solving the bandwidth problem of screen sharing is that you send the commands to render essentially what to display, and then those are displayed client side or instead of the remote. And then obviously, what was that thing that Google did with the remote game stuff? What was that called?
Dream.
They shut it down. No, they shut it down. What was it called? It was like No, it wasn't Dream. Was it Dream? No.
Daydream, actually.
No, it wasn't Daydream. That was the goggles.
Well, that's what you held your hands up for. Yeah.
No. I mean, like they had like you could play your games remotely, right? So they would host the games and run GPUs in the cloud.
Okay.
Do you remember what that was?
Kind of like what PlayStation's doing right now.
Yeah. I can't remember. There was a service that Google came out. I completely forgot it already. But I'm sure Craig knows. Just throwing that out there, Craig. No, but that is that notion of now you're setting a video stream. So you do all the if it's complex, expensive rendering, like a 3D game at really, really high stadium. That's the one. If you're rendering those complex graphics, of course, then shifting off to GPUs on the server side and display the picture, that makes sense in that situation because you're against the reverse. You're offloading that high load situation to a more powerful machine. It means you can have thin clients. But it's the opposite when what we're talking about screen sharing with an app, right? You want to flip that, right?
Yep.
Anyway,
so real quick, Victor, are you going to be around for maybe about 15 more minutes?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, because there are two people who have been waiting with non-Serverpod questions.
Oh yeah,
and I'd like to try to get them in instead of bumping them again because we did just get another Serverpod question.
And I'm though.
You got to bail.
My lunch hour's over, so
yeah,
I'll go back to the day job.
I got about 15 minutes myself.
Thanks everybody. Thanks Victor for coming on. I appreciate it.
Actually, let's cut the questions right now because we want to see Simon do a little coding.
How long do you have, Victor? Like
I have another half hour.
Okay. All right. Well,
so let's try to get through these three questions and we're going to cut off questions right now so we can see some coding. It's a good reason, right? Simon, one of your favorite widgets, intrinsic height. Is there a way to override or limit the actual intrinsic height of the widget, not an intrinsic height widget, a scrollable in a row child. We have a gist number, which is very
wonderful.
interesting. How are we going to get this out of here?
What? It's called copy paste.
I can't copy and paste. If I click on it.
Well, you're doing it wrong then.
I'm clicking.
Stop clicking.
I'm trying to copy.
Let's have a look. Works for me. Must be pressing the wrong buttons. Right.
Okay. What's the secret? That ain't
highlighted and copied it. I have magic fingers apparently.
Okay, maybe you're not getting it. I can't. If I click on it whatsoever, all it does is bring it up and down.
I don't click on it. I'm selecting. Don't worry. On a browser, you don't select by
clicking. He's got the magic select where he doesn't have to use the mouse, folks.
Yeah.
He doesn't have to click on it.
It's called magic select. Yeah, cool. Right.
Go ahead and share it then, genius.
Let's have a share. What do you have? Let's make this smaller.
Oh, we have a correction. Craig is correcting everyone today.
Stadia. That's the one. That's the one.
I can't copy this either. So.
So what's this? Intrusive height. What I'm trying to do, mostly intrusive height in the workspace.
Yeah.
10 items in the checklist. Okay, so we can copy this out in a second and give this a go. We can see if we can resolve the layout problem that you're having. You start down the route of multi-channel render object. You don't need to do that. So in short, we'll try this out in a second if you're interested. Maybe Viktor, what do you think about doing an IoT thing another time where we can actually set aside a stream like time? Is that something you're interested in, like doing IoT with Serverpod?
Yeah, that'd be super cool.
Cool. So then I think, like, we'll see what we can get to, but I'm pretty sure like getting that set up and working like in the time frame that you've got now, and like I'm gonna be left around here like it's just probably not gonna work out. I think if we do some of this now and then answer these few questions, and then we could arrange another time and announce it.
Well, here goes with a few questions so that we can get to them.
Yeah. So we'll get back to the gist in a second, Austin, and we'll do that live on the stream. Go on, what's next on the
where in the app do you ask the user to accept iOS tracking transparency if you're using Firestore for a back end? Reading docs is only really the notification area that's affected.
What? When the app do you ask the user to accept iOS tracking transparency? When your app starts up, wherever you want to?
As much as having a tooth pulled. So,
is this the new privacy stuff that you're talking about, Alex? I haven't even dealt with that yet, so pass.
Yeah. Well, hang on. I'll hang on to that for a minute, Alex, in case you expand on it. So I'm not gonna take
basically.
That one
I think this is like you can't without accepting the track and stuff. You're not going to see notifications in with Firestore, but then you could just create a method channel and have it run whatever the native code is, the new iOS code for like pop up asking the user to accept something, and just run it wherever you want in your code, surely, and just let them know that until they accept that, they're not going to see notifications. All right, we'll go back to that in a minute, but give us a hint. Anyway,
maybe.
Well, it's a bit facetious, right?
I think that might be a little too obvious, but we shall see.
I think it's all about how do you achieve that, right? Which is, if you need to call new, if Firebase doesn't give you these Dart native functions, then you need to create a method channel and call the new functionality from iOS. Like, have they accepted the privacy stuff? And then there's an accept privacy stuff or whatever it is. Okay.
All righty, Viktor, one more for you. Is there a better solution for converting doc snapshots into data class objects than using the with converter and creating to-map from map methods in each single data class.
Use Serverpod ORM. That's good.
I am. Oh, sorry.
I mean, you don't have to use with converter, right? Like that's just completely optional. It's just a way of doing it. But it's essentially, if you've got a to JSON from JSON, you could use those if you support it. You don't have to use to map from map. That's just the Flutter packages version of use with converter, right?
I don't think this is Serverpod.
No, it's not. No, I think it was just a joke that. I was gonna say, do you want to get a glass of water or something?
Yeah, he's been exercising. He's all red.
Yeah, I'm recovering from a bit of a cold.
Yeah, no, this is like Firebase, but yeah, with converter was an addition. You don't have to use it, David. So you can just use the map function .map, and then whenever you get the document, turn it into any object you want using whatever method you want. So, but in some point, you don't even have to convert them, right? You can just keep them as document snapshots if you really want to. It's probably a bad idea, but you can do that. I mean, I say it's a bad idea. Let me explain why, just briefly. And that is, you want to keep your Firebase stuff out of your entirety of the application, right? Like this is Firebase over here. Your dealings with Firebase and its API should be separate to the rest of the application. So then what happens is maybe at a later date you go, oh, you know what? Firebase doesn't support my needs anymore. I want to use Serverpod. And then, instead of having to like replace your entire application because you now integrate Firebase across it, you're just replacing the bit that's Firebase with the Serverpod client, for example, and that solves your problem, right? So, just trying to it's use these features, but I'm saying just don't spread it across your application, right? You want to keep your Firebase specific API implementation where it should be, and then convert. What you're normally doing is converting your document snapshots, which is the Firebase concept, into your own document model, whatever that might be, right? So your own data classes, and then those are what you use throughout your application. And this way, your rest of your application is not dependent on Firebase. I'll shut up there. There you go.
Well, there we go. Since we don't have any, just thought there was a way you do not have to do the mapping yourself. It's not that hard though.
I mean, you can, but that's the point. You can return back literally you could get the data out of a document, return that map, and use the keys. Now, what happens is when you rename a key, what happens? You have to now go through the entire app and rename it. The whole point of doing the mapping is actually a good thing. You may not think you have to do this up front to make a data class and then to define or use a generator to define those JSON fields and how it works. But the whole point is you're doing it in one place and not spreading it throughout your application. But the whole point of using getters and symbols in classes is that they are actually part of the language then, right? The language constructs. This means that you can do things like refactoring and renaming and everything else without having to search and replace, right? And then perhaps, like I give an example. Let's say your system changes from snake case to camel case or something like that. Now you've got to go everywhere and rename tons of stuff, where instead of you're concentrating on one place where it needs to be, which is where you're doing your serialization, deserialization, right? Right. Anyway, sorry, off on one.
All right. So we are off to see the code wizard.
All right. Yeah. Give me a second. It's the wizard. I need an exit, he says. Let's see if I can grab this code. It was Austin, right? That was the height one. So yeah, Austin. So I'll grab your code and we'll chuck it in and we'll give it a go. So I'll share in a second. Just give me a minute. The whole point of this it was around trying to get the right sort of layout. Let's just get this right.
Getting to the good part of my coffee. Maybe I'll wake up now. So I start out with American coffee and then it goes down to Turkish.
Ooh, the strong stuff. The good stuff.
Yep. The Turkish coffee at the bottom.
Do you drink coffee, Victor?
Yeah, I try to keep it to 3 cups a day.
Only 3 cups. Wow,
Yeah.
This is almost 4 cups in one mug.
Yeah.
Now, when I say a cup, I mean 8 ounces.
Less than 5 cups a day. You're not a real developer. I'm sorry.
I started drinking like fake coffee.
I drink
like
3 of these,
coffee.
which is slightly over a liter, I think. 66 ounces.
Oh my god.
Do you sleep at night?
Yeah, I stopped drinking coffee by about 14. So
yeah,
not
by
a
2 p.m.
problem. If you're in the US, that's 2.
Oh, yeah. We say 1400. You don't say 14 by 14. That's American. Interesting. Actually, that's good. Victor, what country are you in?
I'm in Sweden, Stockholm.
Sweden, and in Sweden and Stockholm, do you say like 1:45 or 45 minutes past? Do you know what I mean? Like
a 1:45, yeah.
1:45, yeah. It's the same here in the UK. I just found it really weird. I've been to some places and like it's always you never say 1:45. Like how there's a point where you can say like you don't say like you always say half past, right? But then like maybe it's 22:15. Like you can say like there's a certain part of that divide, but no one's. A lot of places say 45 minutes past, never 1:45, right? The hour, right?
Although this may confuse you.
Go on.
1:30 in Swedish is 1:30.
2:30, right? Oh, it's 1:30?
Yeah. So half is like before the hour.
Yeah.
Oh,
so in Spanish, you've got like uno y medio, which is 1.5. So that kind of reverses on that. So, hey, Victor, since you're in Sweden, you are going to hire me and pay me enough that I can live in the downtown camper by the music center, right?
Of course.
I spent some time there, and I gave a review saying I want to retire there.
Yeah, it's actually a pretty nice place.
Oh, it's gorgeous. I was riding the scooters between there and Old Town.
Oh, yeah.
I must have racked up. I must have racked up a bill of like 500 krona going back and forth on tiers.
Yeah, the trick is to get like a push bike to get around. That's how I do.
I ended up buying one, and then I found buying a electric scooter, and then I found out the airlines won't really let you take the batteries on.
Yeah.
So I might have to ship a battery to your house.
But you can't stow it. Then they won't put it in the hold even.
Well, you can bring the scooter. You just can't bring the battery because it's lithium.
Right. Well,
and
I can't wait for the
scooter will fit in luggage.
I'm really looking forward to the future of battery technology. Like, there's been a lot of like silver, what are they called, silver water ones, or whatever it's called, the new sort of water-based ones that are replacing lithium. Going to be replacing lithium, they hope.
Hopefully they won't explode on airplanes.
I think they're saying they can do twice the capacity, twice the energy density with it as well.
Cool.
Which is interesting. Right.
Are you ready yet? We're stalling for time.
Yes.
Isn't it like the missing piece so we get flying cars and all that?
Right. We had flying cars. They're just really, really hard.
Hey, they already have the technology to do flying cars. Have you seen the?
It's called a helicopter.
Well, no, but I mean, it's they've got drones, like 8 propeller drones, and you sit in the middle of it. Of course, they've always had the Hiller flying platform for the last almost 100 years.
Yeah,
still not sure why they haven't made that popular.
They actually, I saw something in the night. It was like in the early 2000s. Some big sort of millionaire, billionaire actually made a flying car. It had like 4 like jet propellers on the corners, and you could actually use it, but it was just so freaking loud and like you. Yeah. It's like at some point it's like, well, what's the point, right? Anyway,
I think they need an anti-gravity for that, maybe.
Yeah, exactly.
Really pleasant. How hard can it be?
Of course, we could always just use the jet packs that the British military uses.
Oh, yeah.
So.
What was that? What was that guy who did the jet? He has like the jet rockets on his arms and one on his back, and he can like fly around. What was that?
That's kind of what the military uses. It's
Yeah. Well, they bought it. Like
it's,
I can't remember the name of his company now. It's really cool.
Dark Industries.
And Ben, we had already cut off questions because we're trying to get some code in, but we're sitting here killing time waiting for Simon.
If you have a question, I think you can still ask. We can still ask it, but it doesn't mean we're going to answer it.
I think it's for Viktor. Are there concrete plans for push notifications? That is for Serverpod.
I mean, that's also something that would be great as a module. It's not that hard to do. With I used it with SNS, for instance, on AWS. So you can just hook that up pretty easy, or I'm sure there's similar services on like
even with FCM, right? Like with Firebase,
FCM.
You just call their API, right? I mean,
yeah, exactly. So it's not that hard to do. It's kind of hard to do a good module for it, I think, because there's so many use cases you want to cover, and it's hard to.
The thing is, there's already Google APIs as a pub package that supports push notifications. So it's just like throw that into your server and away you go, right? You don't really need.
So they're actually Dart APIs for all the Google APIs, and if you use our authentication, you get like the proper server client thingy, so you can call methods on the client's behalf and stuff like that. So that's otherwise pretty hard to set up, but we made all that work. Well, yeah.
All right, let's.
Here is the link for the jetpack from the Royal Marines, just for fun. Are we still killing time? Oh, okay, good. Simon's ready.
No, I was waiting for you guys. Anyway.
Yeah, right.
All right. So this is the code that Austin sent over in his gist. Let's examine his notes and examine the code, and then we'll see what we need to do. So what he's trying to do, mostly just use intrinsic height of the workspace as the height of the row. Okay. And the checklist should just scroll if it doesn't have enough height. Okay. 10 items in the checklist. Workspace set to height 200. Okay, so the workspace is the green box.
First question. Is this supposed to scroll on its own if there's not enough height, or are you supposed to scroll it?
I think, well, let's have a look here. If the row height is set to, if the workspace is set to 100, the row height is 200 because and the checklist is scrollable.
Right. But do we want to move it to the index automatically, or just leave it to the user to move it?
Hang on a minute. Let me get this logic. Let me just, right, 10 items in a checklist. Worklist height set to 200, which is what we had, right? Okay. Let's go back to that.
Okay.
The row height should be 200 and the checklist should be scrollable. Right, so he wants it to be the height of this, and then you want this panel on the left to be scrollable. You want the whole thing to be scrollable. I'm very confused. The checklist, do you want the checklist to be scrollable? You can do that. 10 items in the checklist, and the workspace is 100, and the row height is 200. The checklist is.
Also, while we're waiting for some feedback on that from Austin, Viktor, you can put your developer advocate hat on and take a note about a pain point. So take that back to the engineering team.
Yeah.
Viktor, you were in a chat the other day with what was it, on one of the Wednesdays after Humpday with Matt Carroll. We were talking about static site generation.
Yeah.
I mean, what was his static site generator? I've forgotten the name of it now.
Static Shock.
That was it, Static Shock. Yeah. Is there any plans to integrate that a bit more, or use that in some way?
Maybe. I mean, we want to make sure all the good stuff works with Serverpod that you may want to serve,
right?
For sure. So Serverpod is more for doing dynamic stuff. It's easier to just host a static website. You can host it on GitHub or even, I'm sure, on like Google, in a Google Cloud storage container. But
I've got a question for a question. Sorry.
Go for it.
Who?
Do you guys know of a way to tell VS Code to automatically add trailing commas in Dart code? My question back is, are you coming from Kotlin or Python? Because no, that would be if you want to try to look up something for a VS Code package, but I really, really doubt it. Yeah, I really doubt it. And it probably would not be all that great an idea, because I don't know if I would trust it to get it right all the time.
I think there's a linter rule for that. Maybe that helps a little bit.
I was just on that static site generator piece. If you are actually like building something in Dart and you want to like publish it to like GitHub pages or something, then there's a package called Peanut, which is built by Kevin Moore, and yeah, you just global activate and then run Peanut, and it will like deploy it to your chosen GitHub pages, which is really nice. And a simple way of like deploying some web project written in Dart. Cool. And then you can do custom domain on your GitHub pages and get free hosting.
Manish, a plain no really doesn't tell us much without a context.
Yeah, we need context.
I'm assuming you mean that won't solve your problem. Anyhow, back to Austin.
Let's get to this. Can we let's get back to the thing. Are we understanding what is being requested here? Because I haven't got that yet. Nice to have 2 items in the checklist. Workspace set to 100. The row height is 100. It seems like if I could wrap the checklist, left panel, just the left panel checklist in that case is scrollable. Yes.
So just the red would be scrollable if the red overruns.
So you want them to be the same height? Is that the thing?
This is what I'm trying to get. Like there's a request here to these two seem to be the same to me. That's what I'm just trying to say. 10 items in the checklist. Workspace is set to 200. The row height, so the output of this like input is that the row height should be 200. And the checklist should be scrollable, right? 10 items in the the checklist. Workspace set to height set to 100, and then you got row height is 200. Checklist should be scrollable, or this should be. I guess he means size of checklists. No, because then it wouldn't be scrollable. So I'm not sure I get that row height should be 200.
Well, the row the second one looks like it would not need to scroll. Oh no, wait, workplace. Okay, the window is set to a height of 100. The row is set to 200. It's probably not a great idea to do that.
No, this is workspace. What?
Right,
sorry,
which I'm thinking is Windows.
Austin. Sorry, this is Austin. A workspace is the green box, right? I haven't actually gone down and looked at what you call stuff, but work area. Yeah. Okay. So you've got a checklist. Well, I'm trying to even understand the use case at all right now. So give me a second.
Yeah, what I'm a little bit confused by is why would having either single child scroll views, or a better solution, of course, would be slivered lists on both of these and have them scrolling independently. How would that not solve this problem? Because obviously it would be, if that solved the problem, you probably would have already done it.
The problem you've got, I think the problem he's getting is that he wants the checklist. Austin, you're going to have to help us out here for a second, right? So I think the problem you're having here is the fact that you want your checklist to be scrollable, right? And your entire view of headed stuff is also inside the scroll view. So you're doing scrolling inside scrolling, right? And the real problem then becomes in that the checklist itself, if it's scrollable, does not have an intrinsic height. Is that what I'm getting at here? So it means you can't set your intrinsic height of the row. I think that's what you're getting, the problem you're getting at least. So I mean, there's a couple of different ways of doing this. You can you can actually do custom intrinsic height manage. Like, yeah. I think that's right. You can do.
Which is right.
Yeah, right. I think that's right. No, my whole explanation was right. Anyway, so
maybe mine was right. Depends on lag.
Okay. Brain. Right. Let's do this. Let's do this. And then I think. But if you need to head off, Victor, please don't feel obliged to have to stick around.
I think I may leave you here and go get some dinner.
Yeah, I've got about 5 more minutes, but by then, hopefully, we'll have it straightened out.
Let's see if we can get this straightened out in 5 minutes.
Yeah.
All right. So,
thank you guys for today. And
no worries.
Thank you for timing, man.
Yeah.
Let's set up a time to do that with IoT.
Yeah, I'll be in touch, Victor, and we can
cool.
we'll sort something out.
Yeah,
and I'll make sure he actually does
pretty
reach
good
out
day for me. So, all right, have a good day over there.
Okay,
thanks again for coming. We'll speak to you soon.
Bye.
Ciao.
Okay.
Right. Let's
just for clarification, Austin. Really, which part was right?
No, I think I got it. Basically. The point here is if he wants the height of this to be a minimum height or to be the height of the workspace, right? So if this gets smaller, it's going to be 200, right? Oh, now I'm not. Hang on, now I'm not getting this right. Okay, Simon is right. Nested vertical scrolls. The checklist intrinsic height seems to be the full height of all of its children, but I want to confine it to no taller than the green box. Okay, yeah. So what you're actually looking for, you are kind of looking down the right road of like a multi-child layout. I'm trying to think if there's a way of achieving this without doing that right now.
So if I understand this correctly, hang on. You want to limit the height of the row to be no taller than the green box? Is that what I'm reading here?
Yeah. So then the red list of check marks would scroll.
Would scroll, and the green list would never have to scroll unless it was bigger than the available area.
Forget about the green thing scrolling for a second, right?
Okay.
The point here is like this, it's now becoming, because the check, you've got a minimum height of 200, right? For that's our first constraint. Let's jot these down so we're not like min height 200, right? And then what we're saying is if I think this is just conflating things right now. The point here is you might have let's say five of these things in a scrolling list, and you can't get the intrinsic height of something you want to scroll because it effectively has no intrinsic height, right? The intrinsic height is all of the height of all of the elements. So
interesting question. If there are
I see where you're going with
in
this,
the green, are they all the same height?
Do is constrict the intrinsics to basically do a limited box, but only on intrinsics, right? I think you can do. I mean, you can do that, Austin, with what's called a proxy box, and I can show you how you do that. However, I don't think that's probably the right solution. You're making like a complex layout behavior, and it's probably easier just to make a layout behavior, right? So annoyingly with intrinsics, you know, the whole idea of it is something that becomes something you have to manage yourself. Like the intrinsic height, intrinsic width are great widgets, but they have the limitations. Basically, what you're seeing right here. So at that point, you go, well, I might as well just do my own layout and not worry about intrinsics at all. Just ask something to measure its layout itself, right, and see how big it is. So So you want it, the limit of the height to be no greater than the green list, the green box. The real green widget has a dynamic height, so I can't just set the row height. But you will have a minimum height of the row of being 200. So
is the green widget a single widget, or is that possibly also a list?
I think the point here is you want the there to be so the work area here will have its height, right? And that's constructible here. Yeah, okay, cool. You don't need that. And then what you're saying is you want the checklist to be scrollable. So you want this to match the outside height. Is there a nice way of doing that? You can do it with a stack, but that's not helpful. Not with intrinsic widths bit of play. Yeah, at this point, you're like, well, I might as well just replace my row with, you're getting to the point of saying, I want to do a custom layout, right? With the behavior that you're looking for. So let's do that, right? I mean, I think you're going in the right direction. There are ways of proxying the intrinsic height, but then you're not actually wanting the intrinsic height of the row. And checklist itself. So you've got single child scroll view. So you want that to, if there's room on the right-hand side for it to get larger, right? You actually want to remove the intrinsic height and have it has no intrinsic height, and therefore it will be told the height by the row if you've got a cross-axis alignment stretch. So if this was set to stretch, has that just solved your problem? Well, that's interesting. Has that? Wait a minute. So if it gets larger, right, and if it's smaller, no, the point here is if it's smaller, you don't want the intrinsic height of the limited box. Right, yeah, so this is smaller. However, you don't want the intrinsic height, you want that to scroll. Which is interesting because I wonder if it's because you've got a single child scroll view that you're actually falling into the problem of intrinsic height. Well, that's only because the only reason it's forcing the green to be large is because the red has a size. That's the key, right? So if we can get the red side not to have a size, then it shouldn't be a problem. Let's have a quick just go at this for a second. Hang on, let me just see if we can do this with widgets before we go. It's not that complicated, but I think the problem here is, yeah. Well, let me just do this. Hang on. Number of items. Slippers are great as said in last live. Yeah,
I was just looking at that, and that goes right along with some advice I was given by somebody on the Flutter team too. That and when we get the Flex documentation I'm working on finished up, it'll be in there. But they recommend that if you need to scroll, you should go straight to slivers, not using a list view or single child scroll view. I mean, yes, they're great convenience widgets, but if you are watching,
it really depends on what you're doing.
Slivers the way to go.
It depends on what you're doing.
Like I said, you argue that one with Greg.
See now, yep, this is what I was expecting. So render viewport does not support returning intrinsic dimensions. And this is the error that you would have been getting, Austin, right? Like you can't do that. So what we want to do is have it just return back a Fulk's intrinsic height. So we're saying back its intrinsic height is 0. So there's no error. So what we want to do is essentially wrap our custom scroll view in something that's going to report an intrinsic height and not pass it down the tree, right? So I wonder if we can do that. Let's have a look. So we're gonna, this row v2 was your render object. We could look at that. I'm just gonna nuke it for a second because you're not using it. What we want to do is a, what should we call this?
For you VS Code users, that's a power of IntelliJ that he's using right here.
We want this to be a proxy widget. And this needs a child to be passed on. What was it? Super.child. What else does it? You can just put a component like this, but that's fine. Yeah. Yep. And then we'll have another class. We'll do this as a force render force 6. Yeah. So the idea of the whole proxy system is basically to forward the calls, right? So you can override just part of the API surface of, let's say, the render objects or the widget hierarchy and stuff like that, and then we can fit something in between. So this allows us to just override the intrinsics part of measurement and not have to implement the entire interface. I'm going to go find a... trying to remember a widget that I've actually done this on.
You know, if there was only someone on the Flutter team in the audience who could help out with this, Craig.
Craig should drop by, shouldn't you, Craig? Is he here?
He might get your link, Craig. Hang on. We may have a winner.
Make the checklist return an intrinsic height of 0. And the green box height is what controls the row height. Exactly what excited to learn about. Yeah, this is exactly what I was talking about. Yeah, he's just confirming that. That's what we're doing. So try to remember.
Yeah, I'm not sure if we have lag going on or not.
What? Oops. Pending. Oh God. Go on, brain. Where am I? I think padding was one of those widgets that does this. I'm just going to go use the framework as documentation. It's been a while. Yeah, so we should be able to get away with single child render object.
One of Simon's pieces of advice from a long time ago. If you're coding in one window and you don't have the documentation open in the other, then you're doing it wrong. That is from Simon from 5 years ago.
I don't know what you're talking about. I never said that. I don't know what you're talking about. Let's see. Maybe this is a good example of a widget that needs to go into the framework, right? So, you know.
Okay, Austin just sent another message, so there's a lag check for you, Austin. Mostly just lag from my brain to the keyboard, but there are a few seconds of lag. Okay. Well, I just told you the moment your message came through, so you can tell us what the lag looks like.
What do we think? Something like that. This would need a bit more thinking to make a proper widget, but I think this is a good working concept, at least right now, to start off with. And then we'll come back and actually, you know, do it properly, right?
That's not too bad.
Right, what's it doing? Render force intrinsic. Blah, 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 blah. So if anyone doesn't know, this is how you create a render object. There's a few different ways. It's the lowest, one of the lowest levels of the tree. And in this case, we're making a widget that hosts a but has a render object attached to it that has a single child widget, right? So we're following that child widget and we have our own parameters. When the widget gets asked to create the render object, we're going to pass back our particular render object. And then when we update our parameters, we get to update the render object. Render objects are stateful, always stateful, right? They will be held around as long as the widget that built them is still around, right? So this means that you can pass new parameters. And this is why you can reconfigure the widget tree and a bunch of other optimizations. So this is part of the
but when talking about the 3-layer cake, we always say that the render layer uses objects that are mutable, which is the exact same thing that Simon just said by saying that they're stateful. If something has a state that can be mutated, it's mutable, for those who might not know.
So what we're just doing, let me scroll down. So what we're just doing here is we're just doing the basics of the render object. We're going to have a couple of mutable variables. If you set those variables, we want to force a relay out of the widget tree because of this portion of the widget tree at least. So we're going to say if our width, if our internal width that we had previously does not equal the new one passed in, then we want to update that width parameter to equal the new one. And then we want to request mark needs layout, and that will basically request that if the height or width changes in our constraint, that we then relay it out. So if I do that again there for height, this is a nice way of doing this. And then we want a way of getting that get width. And just to round off the interface. So there's our width and height. All right, so now we've got that. We want to potentially initialize those parameters. So
Simon, 238's got a problem. 239.
Yeah. I'll get that in a second. Thank you. That would have been an interesting one. Why is it square? Mm-hmm. Let's make actually don't be required. Actually, it's something that they actually need to be.
Yeah, Manish, that's exactly it.
Yeah, it's that again. That's the delay, right? There you go. Thanks. Cool. Interesting. There we go. Okay, so we're going to pass into parameters. We set those locally. We can override them at runtime and request a layout. Now what's going to happen is this render objects have an interface for intrinsics, right? So we got compute and get maximum intrinsic width, height, so on and so forth. So we want, I think the computes is good enough right now. Let's have a quick look at where this is. Yeah, so the computes are actually calling over the get functions on the child widgets. So we're gonna override that behavior, and instead of calling it on the child, we're gonna have it do the work that we wanted to do for us, right? So let's override each one of these. So compute min intrinsic height. And compute max intrinsic width, and compute min. Right, these are the four functions we need to override. And the idea I have right now is to say if width does not equal null, so we've specified a width, we'll override it and return that width. Right. And if we're clever about this. Or does that break anyone's minds? I don't know why I did width. Yeah, so if we have, we want to turn the height, sorry, let me be clear. That's the parameter got me. Okay. So height, and we'll do width. All right, so compute max. I feel like we might need 4 parameters so we can bound it so that there's no maximum. I have to think about that in a minute. We'll see if it works.
Simon,
go on.
You're passing in height on all of them.
No, that's correct.
277 if width case double width, but you're passing in height.
Yeah, that's correct. This is computing the width and returning the width based on a height given.
Okay.
Right? So when you compute, when you have an intrinsic width, you're basing off a height, and when you have a height, you're basing off the width. So that's why this is, if it's confusing to anyone, that's how it works. This is correct.
By the way, it is the hour.
All right,
it is top of the hour right now.
So I think that's all we need to do with this widget now. So if we now grab this widget and then wrap our whatever widget it was our custom scroll view with force intrinsics. I wonder if we can say force a height to be 0. I don't know. Let's see what happens. Restart. Apparently, it breaks it. What do we do? Let's have a look. Is it breaking it constantly?
He does that a lot.
I don't break things. Let's have a look. Come on, give me a clue. And so let's clear this, and
it'll cost you £10. Can I buy a clue?
It's still passing it down. Compute max. I guess that's right. Hang on. Compute intrinsics. Get max intrinsic. I mean, the intrinsic does. Well, that's a good point. Let's go hunting. Let's go hunting. Get min intrinsics. Wait a minute. That's what I'm missing. Hang on. That's what I want to avoid.
Okay. Austin's going to be a little AFK for a few, but he's still kind of monitoring.
Oh, yeah, no worries. You can say, I don't have to do my work today. I've got someone else doing it for me. Do not have over. Do not override this method. Do not override this method. Instead, implement this. Well, I'm going to disagree. I'm going to override that method.
The comment that says, do not change this code. We don't know why, but if you do, it'll break everything.
Nah. So get min intrinsic width.
Better than a comment that says, do not delete this comment. It'll break everything.
Get min intrinsic width. Well, that's the wrong one, actually. That's not a good one to do. Oh, damn. Hang on. So this is going to be based on width. Yeah, width. Height. All right, let's try this again. Let's see. What do we get this time? Let's go back up. It's lying. It's lying. It's a big fat liar. Render proxy box mixing. Compute max. And the question is, why is it not coming down here? All right, let's put some breakpoints. Let's debug this. So yeah, let's go. Maybe we trace this back actually. Let's yeah. Yeah, where is that getting?
Okay, and I have about 5 minutes, so.
Oh. We did something like this before, actually. All right, let's give this another go. Are we in debug? No, let's debug it.
Yeah, I think I'm going to take this chance to jump. So, was crossing my fingers we would have it done by now.
So look, let's have a quick look here. Come on, we haven't run it yet.
All right, one more.
Ah, good. Height infinity.
Mm-hmm.
Ah. Wait a second. We didn't provide one of the parameters, right? So I've given it no width but a height. I'll tell you what this is. This is the problem. Hang on, let's go back in here. I'm pretty sure that what we've done here is right, but it's actually failing on the other. Maybe we get to force it. No. All right, one more thing. This is before we go off on one. Let's go. What's it? The form layout. Yeah, let's just put a breakpoint here for a second and restart. So height coming in is infinity. Hang on. Go away. Do it again. Restart. Right. So we get a max intrinsic width, height infinity. This is coming down from render effects doing compute. So the row above is calling our widgets get max intrinsic height because the intrinsic height is being passed down. This is going to call this because the horizontal or vertical axis of the row, which is what flex is, and Scott knows all about flex. This is going to give us asking for intrinsic width, and we're going to return back 0. Good. And then height 0. Compute max intrinsic height of the flex. Inflexible space should be 0 then. So our okay, yeah. Then we get a perform layout. And here's the question, the constraints. Width infinity, height 200. Perfect. Exactly what we want. So why is it? Has bounded width.
Mm-hmm.
Vertical viewport was given unbounded width. Viewport. Okay, so it's interesting. The infinity width. Yeah.
The way I'm reading that, it's telling me that the parent is not providing a constraint.
Yeah, no, that's correct. And that is exactly what's happening here. So right now we've got two intrinsically sized widgets, like checklist here, right? But what we want to do is wrap this in. I think this is a question for Austin, so we'll see what he comes back with it. But let's do expanded on both of these. This is going to give them because it's a row, is going to give them, there you go, a correct horizontal constraint. So let's see what happens. Does this solve it? Hey, look, it scrolls. Yay. And it gets bigger. And now it doesn't scroll because
there are not enough of them. You're at 10. Add more.
That's it. Yeah, but I mean, like, doesn't matter. That will scroll, right? And as soon as there's a point, it may get to a point where it doesn't need to scroll, right? So this is because it's got they're
scrolling independently when they're both too long. And the size of
it's not.
report.
No, this is correct. This is exactly what I wanted, right?
No, I said it's right.
Oh.
Increase the red to 20.
Well, let's just reduce the green down.
No, that's not what.
Yes, that one scrolls then. Doesn't matter what size this is.
I get it. I get that. You're not going the direction that I'm asking.
Go on,
please make the green one 500 or 700.
Right.
Okay, there we go. Fine. Now make 20 in the red. Okay.
Yeah.
So now they each scroll independently. Well, actually, no. I thought the green would scroll independently. Maybe only if the red.
There's nothing to scroll because the green doesn't scroll on its own. The green is part of the outside content. That's what we're saying.
Okay. Try shortening up the red and see what happens when you scroll the green.
But I'm not scrolling the green. I'm scrolling the outside list. Yes, but there you go.
I get it. Do maybe shorten the red to the point. Yeah, there you go. Now scroll the green. Yeah, okay.
It's working.
For some reason, I thought the green was scrolling by itself and not moving the red for a moment.
So we've done, I think the question here, right, is more about how.
Actually, since Austin's not right here, do him a favor and very slowly scroll up over all this code so that he can use the video to go back and reproduce
it. I'll post a reply as just with it in. I can do that. And I'll post on I'll post it on in a second actually as a full example, so everyone here watching can get it. I'm just thinking about how this can be made better, right? So it really does depend on how you're using this. False constraints it's not, this works. This does exactly what I wanted it to do. So this is good. But like what we just saw, it's not if the value coming in is infinity and you've got a height, then this probably needs to throw, which is basically what the problem was initially, right? So when we were like, it depends on what you're returning. Now we'll leave it like this. This is a good example of how you might fix this kind of thing.
All right, and since this is running now, I'm going to run away. Since I said I was going to run away 25 minutes ago.
Run away.
That's it. Bunny rabbit. All right. Talk to you all later. I will see everybody next week.
Okay. Right. We'll just wrap this up. I'm just going to tie this up a little, and then we'll post this, and I'll post in the chat. And then hopefully by that time, Austin's finished. I'm thinking that there's no reason this needs to be a custom scroll view, mind you. This could be any type of scrolling content. It's interesting that a single child scroll view so a single child scroll view viewport, I don't know why it's not highlighting, but must support intrinsics. So that's interesting. Let's have a quick look. Render object with child mixin. Yeah, so there you go. So it does. It passes over the intrinsic constraint mapping. And dry layout. So yeah, so actually, you know, all things considered, yeah, actually, all things considered, this, yeah, it's a shame you can't. I suppose you could do this, the same thing that we're doing right now with the single child scroll view. You could just put your false intrinsics on the inside of the single child scroll view. So you have a single child scroll view, then that, and it passes it onto the false intrinsic, which returns 0 and doesn't pass the intrinsic dimension down. So you're not getting the intrinsic dimension of the column. Is basically what we're trying to avoid here. So there's actually, I mean, to be honest, this whole thing, there's a slightly better way of doing this, which is with a custom. This is where you get into this thing of what am I actually trying to do here? Like, what is the reasons for me doing this? The problem you've got is one of actually, did this have? Did it have a max height? The thing here, right, is that you get to the point where you're building your layouts and you're making it way too complicated, right? Like in terms of you've got a bunch of different widgets all working the constraints in weird ways with each other, using lots of widgets to kind of accomplish what you're trying to do. And at some point you're like, well, there's a lot of implicit behavior in this layout, when if I was explicit with my layout, then it would be a lot easier to read and understand and work with. And that's probably where you want to go, right? So I think, are people still here? Are people still interested? There's a lag, but I'll see what comes up in the chat, because if they are, what we could do is follow this up with a little see if we can find this here. Hang on. Yes, we are. I mean, still here. Yeah, cool. I mean, like we could follow this up if people want to know. We're doing a custom layout for these widgets and show how you do the same thing without all this intrinsic stuff. So let me explain why you might want to do that. So one was a complexity of your layouts. I mean, this is relatively simple-ish. I mean, this is relatively simple. However, it can get way more complicated. But the nice thing about doing a layout yourself is you can also potentially do it in a single layout pass, right? So rather than having to do like the intrinsic height piece, you can actually know, in this case, you know, you can grab the intrinsic height here of the work area. That's all you need to calculate the rest of this layout, right? From a item, when it's one of these items in the single child scroll, right? So there's definitely an aspect here which is you can simplify with your own layout. That does come with its downsides in terms of adding complexity, but I think it's worth it in this case. And it was along the same lines of what we've done before. So I think we should do it. That's what we should do. I think we should do it. Right. So let's grab this first of all, and I'm going to publish this as a gist and then reply to his gist with a link. Can I fork it? I think I can. if the browser just didn't crash on me one times. Right. Let's fork it. It'll let me. Yep. And we're going to edit this. Because Humpday. What? How was I naming these things again? I forget. Humpday 2024. 06 12 1.dart. And bear with me. Intrinsic in force intrinsics. And today's date is, what was it, the 12th June. All right, so if anyone wants to grab this code, the link is in the chat. Cherie, you're a bit late on that one. So the question was posted, will Serverpod support Swagger? And we already talked about this earlier on. So go back in the show, you can read about it. And the answer is probably. I think the hope is that yes, it will. But obviously there's no hard and fast answer to that until they do a bit more work. So, but I think, yeah, in short, I think everyone thinks that that's a good idea. Right. But go back to the video and you can see Viktor's response and everything to that. Right. So how do we do this without forced intrinsics, and how do we do this with a custom layout? Yeah, that's what we're trying to get to. So we actually do have, I'm going to make this quicker because I want to get going. But we actually do have a couple of multi-child. Where was it? I think it was wizard buttons. We looked at this before, so let's have a quick look. Yeah, that works. That works. So we're going to do the same thing just because I can copy paste it without having to redo it all again. But so I'm going to go down to the bottom here and we're going to get rid of our forced intrinsics, which in itself is not like, it's essentially a hack, right? Like we're working around the problem. We're not actually resolving it appropriately. And we're going to rename this to, what are we going to call this? I don't know what this element is called. Do we have a name up here? Header stuff. I guess we'll call it row stuff. I don't know. Body stuff, content stuff. Let's call it content stuff. Why not? So content stuff. And this is going to have a left and a right widget. Sounds good. The layout ID widget is just rewrapping that so we can provide like a handle to the ID so we can get it during layout. No worries, Frey. You'll find there's some good talk. So go back and watch it. There's some good questions and answers about server-side stuff if you're interested. Right. So render content stuff. And we'll keep all this stuff the same. This is just the minutia around supporting the multi-child layout protocol. So these two, the mixins here provide all the default functionality. So you don't have to make these really long, complex render objects, which you would do normally before these were like, well, before these became sort of mainstream. So you don't have to provide a bunch of like the default behavior and logic. You can just add the mixins and get it for free. parent data is something that you do need for every widget in a multi-child situation. This is just one so we can attach an ID and find it. But strictly speaking, you don't need this, right? Like we actually don't use the IDs. So we can probably not worry about it. Let's see. Yeah, so this is providing the parent ID up. Yeah, okay. Well, all right. Well, we'll use that. But anyway, ID to child. We've got layout child, position child. And then we're going to provide a very similar thing, right? So this is kind of a really basic sort of layout, multi-child layout widget. So this is taking this child to ID map. We're using this from the mixit here, but that's going to go get us a map of these IDs to these render objects. And then we can then choose to layout or position one of those instead of having to write this out all the time, right? So this is like a bit of a cheat, basically, right? So what we want to do first of all is work out what our green box height is. We could tell it to just lay out without having to require it to. Okay, if you know the width, then we can just say give it a loose height. That's what kind of work it out here, right? So first of all, we're going to do it 50-50 like we have right now. There may be other ways. You can do other custom ways of doing your width. You could get the intrinsic width of the green portion, like how big it wants to be, and then leave the red to the remainder, of vice versa. We're not able to do that on the left-hand side, again, because of the width. Now, again, let me be clear about this. The reason why you can't do that on a viewport, that is scrolling content, is because the content that's off-screen doesn't exist yet. So how can I get the intrinsic width of that content? It would have to go layout and calculate every single widget. The whole point of having that scroll is not having that, right? That's one of the reasons why single child scroll view supports that, right? So what we could do, depending on, again, I don't know how many checkboxes we're going to have here. If it's going to be 20, it's maybe not a big deal to use a single child scroll view for that. In which case you could get the intrinsic width, right? Because that's passing it down. And it would measure all of the widgets. However, equally, if you know how wide it's going to be, well, you could just set the width, right? Fix the width. And if you're doing a custom layout, you've got the options, right? All right, so width. Chart, let's call this width constraint. So let me have a think about this. Hang on. No, we'll do it like this. We're going to do it without intrinsics at all. We should be able to do that, right? So width constraint equals. Let's flip this around. So we want the width constraint to be our max width divided by 2. And then we'll have I want tight constraints on that width. So we'll just do a new box constraints here. And our min width is this. Our max width is this. And then our height is going to be 0 infinite. So that's our width constraint. And then what we want to do is lay out our particular child, in this case, the right side, with those width constraint. And that's going to give us right size, the right widget size. And now we need to position that right widget on the right-hand side. And then we want the remainder of the left-hand one to be measured based on that, right? So in this case, we want to say position child right. Oops. And we want a left width. No, left. Well, actually, we'll just do new constraints. So we'll just say we only got 2 widgets, so we'll just do layout left box constraints. And these are going to be tight constraints based off a size. And that size is going to be our I'm going to do like type 4. Type for width. That's what I want. Okay, I know it's there somewhere. If we do type for here, and then we can have this here and width, and we'll have width, child width. Much better. All right, we'll get there. So we'll get the right-hand size. We'll come back to positioning that one. And then our type constraints are going to be the child width. And then the height would be our right size dot height. And then we want to position that child. So you always need to, the position's default 0, 0. So if you don't position, they're always going to be top left. However we want to position them ourselves. Now we've done that, all the rest, this is the original, like the outcode for the other widget. We don't really care about that. So constraints.max width and right size.height. There you go. And I think that about does it. So all we need to do is set the offsets and our little layout widget is done. So this is just us positioning those widgets and sizing them appropriate to the constraints and the behavior that we care about, right? So right side is going to be our constraints max width minus the right size dot width. All right. So top right, back right. That's the top left of the widget always that you're positioning, right? And then our y is going to be 0. Cool. All right, and then our left widget is the x and the y are both 0 actually. So we'll shortcut that with offset.0. Cool. I think that's it. So now what we've got this render content stuff widget. And then if we go up and where are we? Let's go up to our layout. So in here, our where is it? Decorated box. So instead of our row, we can replace that with our content stuff. We don't need an intrinsic height anymore. And this becomes left checklist. Right work area. Obviously, you know, if you know what these are and it's only using this, you could call the parameters checklist and work area, right? Not left and right. I mean, I'm just using that as abstract thinking, right? But anyway, let's restart. There you go. That worked. Now let's see what happens. Make it larger. Yay. Make it smaller. Yay. This scrolls. And this can be, let's make this larger and this smaller. This doesn't scroll. Make this larger and that side scrolls. Yeah, it's the behavior, exact same behavior, but instead of having like magical intrinsics or some other weird behavior, yeah, let's just minimize this work area. Commit it. You want it, do you? He goes, Manish wants it. He wants to examine the code. Yeah, so this is a kind of a neat little way of doing your own render. The only reason, by the way, let me be clear. The reason why we're not there's a widget based in the framework called custom multi-child layout. So I can bring that up. I had a little bit of there's a ticket with my conversation around this on the Flutter repo. Yeah, Randall's voice, ship it. The problem with doing this widget, which is ideally the one we'd want to use to solve this problem, is that it doesn't support you sizing the actual parent. This has to expand to fit its parent. So it always uses tight constraints, even if the constraints passed in are loose. It won't be based on the size and position of the children, which is really the problem, right? Like that's the only thing that holds most of the it's literally every reason I end up doing a render object is because the perform layout here doesn't actually where is it? You have to pass the size in. You can't intrinsically choose its own size. So this always, you can see here, get size, constraints.biggest. You can override this, but you need to know like ahead of time how big it's going to be. And that's not during layout. So, I mean, I to be honest, I just don't know why it would just make obvious here that you return size from perform layout, which is how it works. And then I don't know. You could then just do constraints.biggest, right, as the default implementation or whatever. I don't know. There's a ton of ways you could do it, but yeah, look, the size cannot reflect the size of its children. If a layout has to fixed height or width, return size can reflect this. The size will be constrained given both constraints. Anyway, but this is literally the problem, right? Which ends up means you can't use the custom multi-child layout. This is how you solve that, right? So you make a multi-child render object, and you see here we're actually using the oh no, this is the wrong one. Oh, get back here. We're using a multi-child render object widget, and then here we're using our own render content stuff. Extends a box render. Oh my god, a render box, and then these two mixes are basically saying the children are also render boxes. And then their parent data is this one. We're using this parent data as a way of shortcutting the need to go find the widgets. So we use the child to ID map function here to actually go dig out those IDs and put them in a map for a response. So it's just a cheeky way of being able to specify IDs to access them. I mean, to be honest, it's not like, yeah, it's not a big deal. Like the trick here, I mean, it's a bit of a hack, but the trick is we get that map up front, and then we use that map to use position and layout child to actually access it. So yeah, no, it works. Do we want to just maybe extend this a little bit around 50-50, have a intrinsic width on our checklist, which was the original code, how it worked? Are we interested in that? If I get some yeses, I'll do it. If I don't, then we'll end it here. Yeah, I mean, it's not waiting for the lag. There's not too much to worry about. I'll do it anyway. It's a quick change. So we're just flipping this back over to being, hey, we have a hey from Twitch. We don't normally get people from Twitch. We're on Twitch, YouTube, and Twitter. And we're doing some Flutter coding. I do not speak a Spanish. Sorry. Yeah, so let's wrap this up in a custom, what's that? Single child scroll view, and then we'll flip this out for being child, which is a column. What am I doing? And this is children. Right. Cool. I don't think we need that actually. Main exercise min. This is pretty much putting back to how it started. We don't need those anymore, and then this could be a list.generate. We need index, right? A number of items. Yeah. I mean, I prefer doing something like this. So I'm going to do this. Int index, or index is less than number of items. Plus. To me, that reads a lot easier than like any of the sort of callbacks. Yeah, I'm just going to make a list of this many items. Maybe I'm old-fashioned. Yeah. Right. So run that. Good. Now we have. You can see now it's got smaller. This is because this has now got its fixed size here, its own size, and we can actually go one step further and. So at the moment it's 50-50, and this has been centered by the column. We could set our main axis alignment to start, right? But it's still going to not do what I want, apparently. Oh, 1% cross-axis. Cross-axis alignment start. There we go. But it's still, the width is 50 because we told it it's going to be that big, right? So now what we want to do is go to our layout. When we measure that that right-hand side, we lay out that right-hand side. This is how intrinsic we want it to be. And it's the remainder of this, right? That's going to tell you, let's have a look here. So we want the red, was it the red box to be its intrinsic width, and the remainder to go to the right box this time, right? But we want the height of the left one. So we either have to do layout twice, or we now use an intrinsic, right? So we want to get the intrinsic width of the left box, right? So what we want to do is id to child left dot get intrinsic get max intrinsic width based on a infinite height, because we don't have a height right now. It may come back with I don't know, right? But that's, so I'm going to say left width. All right, so now we have the left width. We can now say our right width is going to be the width constraint. So we'll call this right width is our max width minus the left width. That's the remainder. And when we lay out our right widget, we want to use right width. And when we lay out our left widget, so right size, that would be offset of, yeah, that's correct. Doesn't matter which way you come at that. And then left width on the left widget. So given that, let's see what happens. Yay. Okay, cool. So now if this one grows, can I get it up to 99? Or 100 to just get the width to change. I could just like restart it with a high number, couldn't I? Never mind. I'm there now. Right. There you go. Smaller, larger, smaller, larger. So that's cool. And now obviously the red doesn't stretch, but that's because the outside column is, but we're telling it that we don't want it to. So in checklist, we want this to be stretch, which is going to say all the children in that column have to be the width of the column itself, and that'll scroll. So there you go. Let's restart it. And did that? Oh, it did restart, yeah. And then, so if this gets smaller, it gets larger. Yeah, that works. Cool. So there you go. So that's like how you might do a custom layout, right? We've implemented our own set of rules of how we want to size and position those boxes to make sense. So the only thing that you need to make sure is when you override a perform layout, or layout on a render object, that you make sure you set the size. Not all widgets require this, but unless it's parent set size, I think there's a parent set size by parent. Unless you've got that set to true, you're required to set the size to every time that function is called. And that's it. Simple. Let's grab it. And then I'm going to post a gist. Did I post the last gist for everyone? So this is the first version. Where are you going to use this code? I'm not using it. It's for Austin, one of our viewers who was just asking a question earlier. So I forked his original PR to do that one. And I'm just going to create a new gist so that everyone can have that as well. I don't need this code. Like I just said, if I needed something else, I'll just go make it right as I need it. But this is a great learning aid for those people that want to know a bit more around how you do this kind of stuff. What are we going to call this? Custom multi-child layouts. 12th of June with this video. Yeah. Create public gist. It's about public gist, I think. Yeah. Cool. And then the part 2 gist is now on the stream as well. I guess if you're watching on Twitch, hopefully, there you go. I don't know if it posts to Twitch, but that's just go to gist.github.com/slightfoot and you'll see the links. Right then. Well, hopefully Austin, did he get back from his stand-up? I didn't see a message from him. Oh, we've got someone here from someone else. Oh, it's the guy from Twitch. Hey. Well done. You published 3 applications. One with loads of downloads. Yes, English is really good to learn. And it's good definitely to study. Check out what I've posted that hopefully helps you in moving forward and learning about this stuff. Right. Well, there you go. I think that's where we'll park the stream today. And I will post on Twitter. You can follow me on, where was it? Let's see if I can get back up again. There you go. Well, bam. You can follow me on Twitter, and you'll get notifications when we do another stream that's not Humpday. So follow me at DevAngelsLondon. Right, thanks for joining us, and hope you all had an interesting stream and got to learn some new things around Flutter. And we'll be here same time, same place, 166 hours, 165 hours from now. So same time, same place next week. And I'll see you all then. Bye for now.